Hey, welcome to Star Wars Force Time. Please like and subscribe to my channel, I'd really appreciate it. Plus, today's video is part 1 of the Rise of Kylo Ren. So in order to get proper notification when I upload part 2, I'm gonna need you to hit that subscribe button plus the bell. All right, let's get started. So we know there was baby Ben Solo, we know there was Kylo Ren, but we really don't know a whole lot of what transpired in those early years. Recently, Adam Driver's been mentioned in a couple of articles because the gentleman who interviewed him for that big Vanity Fair spread that came out last year in May of 2019, that always comes out in advance of a new Star Wars release. Well, the interviewer recently gave an interview in which he recalled additional information that was discussed between himself and Adam Driver that didn't make it into the final article. And I'll read you a quote from, this is from Lex Grossman. Quote, "When I interviewed Adam Driver, he had a lot of really interesting thoughts about Ben Solo's childhood, but then it wasn't really much in the movie, so I think we just have to assume that his childhood sucked and that's why he turned to the dark side." Mr. Grossman goes on to say, "This is actually a thing Adam Driver said. He said he thought that both Han Solo and Leia were way too self-absorbed and into this idea of themselves being heroes to really be attentive parents in the way that a young and tender Kylo Ren really needed." End quote. So let's take a look at the timeline of Ben Solo. I started off at 4 ABY. That is 4 years after the Battle of Yavin. 4 ABY is when the Battle of Endor took place at the end of the Return of the Jedi. And that's when we have the destruction of the Death Star. We've got the death of Palpatine, or so we thought. And we've got the death of Darth Vader. The main leadership of the Empire is now gone, as well as their precious second Death Star. But it's not the final end of the Empire. That happens over the course of the next year. And Princess Leia and Han Solo are still very much involved with the rebels in order to bring a final end to the Empire. And of course, a couple days after the Battle of Endor, Princess Leia and Han Solo were also married. So now let's skip forward to 5 ABY. And a year later, after the Battle of Endor, we're looking at the Battle of Jakku, in which we saw the remnants of in the desert at the beginning of The Force Awakens. And that was the death knell for the Empire. That was the end of it. A month after the Battle of Jakku, Mon Mothma and Princess Leia went to the remaining remnants of the Empire that were still in leadership and entered into a peace treaty they called the Galactic Concordance. And at that time, it was the final end of the Empire and the beginning of the New Republic. Still, there was a lot of politicking to be done, and at the signing of the ceremony, it should be noted that Princess Leia was very, very much pregnant. In fact, she went into labor during the signing of this peace treaty and did nothing about it. She didn't want to interrupt the peace of the galaxy, so she put the livelihood of herself and her son aside in order to do that. There's a quote from her in one of the comics that came out in 2016 that says something to the effect of that she'd rather be seen as a monster that believes in something, willing to give up everything in order to ensure that the galaxy is better off, than be someone who stands on the sidelines and does nothing. And I think her actions right there at that treaty signing speak volumes to that. So now we're at 5 ABY. Ben Solo was born. Princess Leia is still working with the New Republic and politicking. Han Solo goes off and does racing. He has a crew that races and he works on ships, and supposedly he made some decent money off of doing that. But it took him out of the house, as well as Princess Leia wasn't always around. They had a droid raising young Ben Solo, and the droid one day went ballistic, and we know from one of the novels, attempted to kill him. So that left an impression. But yeah, so Mom and Dad weren't always around, clearly. And during that time, young Ben Solo was Force sensitive. Princess Leia felt his Force sensitivity when she was pregnant with him. And as much as she felt that he was a bright light, he also had this vein, they said a vein of darkness would every once in a while flow through his Force signature. And that continued on through his young years as an infant, as a toddler, was already using the Force to throw toys around the room. Han Solo during this time supposedly felt very alienated from him because he didn't have that Force connection that Leia had with him. But they weren't hands-on with him at this time, as far as we know, that their interests were elsewhere. Also, we know that there was a lot of fear in Princess Leia that her son would turn out to be like her father, Darth Vader. We don't really know much more until, next on our timeline, 15 ABY. Ben Solo is 10 years old, and he's sent to Luke Skywalker. When I originally thought he was sent to Luke, I didn't realize it was 10 years old, but it was. How we know that is because one of the novels says that he was sent to Luke 19 years prior to the destruction of Hosnian Prime. And we know that that destruction took place in 34 ABY. Let's get back to the timeline. So now we've got Luke mentoring Ben Solo, which we know wasn't always a great relationship between the two. We know in 28 ABY, Princess Leia's political opponents made it known that her father was Darth Vader. Ben did not know his grandfather was Darth Vader until then. This is also the year that we saw the destruction of Luke Skywalker's Jedi Temple, and when Ben Solo turned to Snoke and became Kylo Ren. Just to look at this timeline here, we've got from birth to 10 years old is when young Ben Solo was under the roof of his parents, and even at that, he may have been under the parents' roof, but the parents weren't always home. Then we have a 10-year-old child being sent away for training with this undercurrent of darkness that was already known by Leia. And there he stayed with Luke for 13 years, longer than he was with his parents. And at the age of 23, found out Darth Vader was his grandfather, is when he turned and the events that were recalled in The Last Jedi took place, and he became Kylo Ren. And that's at 28 ABY. So then we've got him under the persona of Kylo Ren for 6 to 7 years. 34 ABY is the destruction of Starkiller Base, where we are at The Force Awakens. Between the end of The Force Awakens to 35 ABY, and we see the redemption of Ben Solo. And what we can glean from the comics as well as the novelizations is that there was always this undercurrent of Snoke or Palpatine or whomever it was. There was this dark force that was always manipulating him from the shadows, even in the womb with Leia. At 30 years of age, we've got him leaving behind the persona of Kylo Ren and becoming the redeemed Ben Solo, ultimately vanishing into the Force. Just tragic. It's very clear that Han and Leia weren't hands-on parents. And what's unfortunate is that we don't have a lot from the storytellers at Lucasfilm to tell us otherwise. You know, from the perspective of looking at it through this timeline, the poor kid really never had a chance. It's no wonder that he turned. The only constant, reassuring voice that wasn't afraid of him really was the voice of Snoke. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed part 1. Remember to subscribe so you can get notice when I upload part 2. And until next time, may the Force be with you, always.